New York used to be the promised land of dreams, but that dream is now gradually transforming into a nightmare. A place where you can see an entire generation left behind, sleeping on the sidewalks in front of empty shopping malls. The shopping areas that once shone brightly with lights now hang "For Rent" signs. The offices that were once bustling are now as silent as a morgue. And in the heart of the city, once a symbol of the free world, are people quietly huddled, covering their faces with thin blankets, trying to avoid the gaze of society. The fear is pervasive, not only among the homeless, but also among those who still have homes. Fear of losing a job, afraid of rent increases, afraid of being sidelined by a system that has no room for anyone but profit. In today's video, let us take you on a journey to explore a legendary city gradually falling apart, in silence, in darkness, and amidst the deserted streets echoing with the footsteps of forgotten homeless people. Do you remember? When was the last time you walked into the shopping mall and found it crowded and vibrant? If you have to take a moment to remember, then perhaps the bustling shopping mall you used to visit no longer exists as it did in your memory. New York once prided itself on its bustling shopping malls, places where people not only came to shop, but also to live, to immerse themselves in the rhythm of a city that never sleeps. But today, what will you see when you return? A thick darkness envelops the abandoned building. Dim lights, cracked and stained glass, corridors covered in dust as if no one had walked through them. And more importantly, what was once a symbol of consumerism has now become the final refuge for those who have nothing left in their hands. When everyone has left, who will remain? Those are the homeless. They don't come here to shop, but to take shelter. The once magnificent main halls have now become temporary bedrooms, where the homeless try to find a hidden corner to escape the harshness of the streets, the dangers of refugee camps, and the shame of facing society's gaze. From the heart of the consumer dream, shopping malls have now become ghost houses due to their emptiness and neglect. The state of homelessness in New York has reached alarming levels, with over 108,464 people having no roof over their heads to return to. But the question is no longer how many, but rather, why does a society that once promised opportunity for all allow over 100,000 people to live without shelter? The answer lies in the fact that more than 1/3 of New York residents have to spend over 50% of their income just on rent. A ratio almost unimaginable for those who once believed that hard work would be enough to get by. But when wages stagnate, rents soar, affordable apartments gradually disappear, and outdated laws turn housing renovations into a bureaucratic maze. No matter how diligent you are, just a slight misstep can send you plummeting into the abyss. Did you ever think homelessness was someone else's problem? In today's New York, that could happen to anyone. Worse still, the presence of homeless people in abandoned malls makes the surrounding areas feel cold and desolate, like a graveyard. Residents are moving away. Businesses are fleeing, leaving behind a city that has lost its community anchors, and also lost the belief that this place can still be a refuge. In Rhode Island, an old shopping mall has been converted into 48 micro apartments. Not perfect, but enough for those with nothing to start over. However, in New York, where there are more than 88,000 vacant apartments, converting malls into living spaces is nearly impossible. Everything is blocked by strange requirements. The area must meet standards, the architecture cannot be changed, and there must be parking. Meanwhile, workers, the elderly, and veterans are still huddled on the sidewalks, right next to the tightly locked doors of a city with empty spaces, but no room for the poor. So why can't a city with so much empty space provide them with a roof? Why let the last hope of a homeless person rot along with the abandoned buildings? And if you still think this doesn't concern you, then don't take your eyes off the video. Because behind those ghost malls is a tsunami called unemployment quietly approaching. And when it hits, the first ones swept away are often those who've spent their whole lives pouring everything into one job just to keep their heads above water. There are things that were once considered solid pillars for each person's life: a diploma, a stable job, and a rented apartment paid on time. But in New York today, those seemingly normal things are becoming a luxury privilege. After the pandemic, as the wave of remote work swept in like a tide, a series of offices in downtown Manhattan, especially in Midtown South, gradually turned into empty shells. Each row of brightly lit buildings now only has the faint glow of security lights at night. And with every office left empty, thousands more American dreams quietly fade away. New York now has over 136 million square feet of vacant office space, equivalent to more than 29 unused Empire State Buildings. But this is not just a story about wasted space. Each empty square meter is a final blow to someone's dream. Someone who once had a job, once paid taxes, once had plans for the future, but then got caught in a spiral of collapse that they themselves could not control. They call it the doom loop, the death spiral of modern cities. It starts with empty offices, reduced property taxes, budget shortfalls. The city raises fees and taxes. Residents leave, businesses close, job losses, and in the end, it all spirals into homelessness. But the tragedy doesn't stop at job loss. There's a harsher truth is, even if you're working 2, even 3 jobs, rent is still out of reach. Because in a city as expensive as New York, working hard isn't even enough to survive, let alone have a decent life. And it's not just the unemployed, the once busy lunch spots, the small shops that relied on office workers. They're disappearing too. One shuttered door means one job gone. And when an entire block shuts down, the city stops being a place to live and starts turning into a real-life ghost town. New York once had a plan to convert office buildings constructed before 1990 into apartments. Prominent projects like 25 Water Street, which is being converted into 1,300 apartments, are seen as leading examples. But with hundreds of barriers related to laws, architecture, renovation costs, and the complexity of the governance mechanism between the city and the state, everything remains at the pilot stage. The issue here is not just job loss. It is a fracture in the entire social system. A city that loses jobs doesn't just lose income tax. It loses trust and its very soul. So if even those who once had jobs, once contributed, once did everything right, and still got abandoned, then who among us can be sure that we won't be the next? New York, the financial center of the world, where real estate values can exceed even the GDP of a small country. But did you know that this very city that doesn't sleep is the capital of the homeless, where hundreds of thousands of people don't know where to sleep? The number of more than 108,464 people without housing is not just a statistic. Those are thousands of untold stories, the crumbling hope of people who once lived a stable life. Now has to live in cars, parks, or crowded into temporary shelters. New York was once promised a place of opportunity for all. But when wages don't rise, but rent prices still skyrocket every quarter, even normal opportunities are gradually becoming the privilege of the few. There are people who do 2 to 3 jobs at a time, work 60 hours per week, or even more than, can still be pushed to the margins of society because of a single accident, a medical bill, or an unexpected round of staff cuts. And that is no longer anyone else's story. It's the prospect of hanging over the heads of millions of Americans, especially those who once believed that hard work was enough to be protected. In a city where lattes can cost up to $8, you'll easily find an elderly person huddled on street corners or under damp bridges. The skyscrapers still lit up with lights, but at their feet, there were people who were gradually being covered by thickening darkness. And when homeless people are driven out of public places, banned from setting up tents, and their blankets removed as an act of urban cleaning, we are not only losing people, but also losing the remaining humanity of a city that once prided itself on being a symbol of freedom and opportunity. So if the most prosperous society cannot take care of the most vulnerable, what are we left to be proud of? There was a time when being middle class in New York meant you were living a stable, with a living income, a modest rented apartment, a few vacations a year, and the belief that just try, you will always have a stable life. But today, that same class has become the most vulnerable group, because they are not poor to receive benefits, nor rich to cope with escalating prices. Between the precariousness of low-income workers on the one hand and the privilege of the wealthy, the middle class is caught between two worlds that are increasingly apart. They are teachers, administrative staff, delivery drivers, nurses, maintenance workers, who still get up early to go to work every day, still pay full taxes, but increasingly feel like they're being left behind. A 60-year-old woman who used to be an office worker in Queens shared that she now has to live in an old SUV. I have a college degree. I used to have a stable job, but after losing my job in 2021 and not being able to afford the $4,000 rent, I had no other choice. That's not an isolated story. It's the reality of thousands of people. Used to be stable, used to believe that working hard is enough. In a city where the average rent exceeds $4,500 per month, spending more than 50%, even 70% of income on rent is no longer the exception, but the rule. That huge number leaves tens of thousands of households in New York living in a state of overspending on housing. That means just one unexpected hospital bill, one layoff, or a badly damaged car is enough to drag them down to the brink of losing their home. And as the middle class, that is the mainstay of, society begins to collapse. The breakdown doesn't stop at individuals. It's spread throughout the community. The school lost students because the family had to move. The hospital was understaffed because nurses could no longer afford the cost of living. The once peaceful neighborhoods are now without their old neighbors, replaced by a feeling of temporariness and insecurity. The middle class is not asking for help. They only wish to continue living exactly what they believed, that hard work will be exchanged for a decent life. But now, even that belief is being tested. And if those who were once considered stable also start to wobble, then who else can be stable? New York has no shortage of empty houses. There is no shortage of abandoned buildings. There is no shortage of cold shopping malls left behind like the ghosts of a bygone golden age. But New York lacks something more important, a policy flexible enough to turn those spaces into human habitation. Did you know, while more than 108,000 people are living homeless in New York, including children, the elderly, veterans, and people with disabilities, the city still has more than 88,000 vacant apartments, a number equal to the entire population of a small city like Albany. But instead of being used to solve the housing crisis, those apartments were left behind, waiting for the market to increase in price again. Want to convert an old office building into housing? The law requires you to ensure there is enough natural light in every apartment, even if the occupant only needs one roof overnight. Parking is required, even though the building is right next to the subway station. Need to meet ceiling height standards, wall spacing, soundproofing materials, all standards that were originally for high-end areas, now apply to efforts to build shelters for the poor. In a city once hailed as a center of innovation, it is outdated laws that are causing all reform efforts to crumble before they begin. The New York government once announced a major initiative, converting old office buildings built before 1990 into more than 20,000 housing units. But to date, only a few projects like 25 Water Street are being implemented, and most are still stuck in getting approval from Albany. Do you see the contradiction? One side is a person with nowhere to sleep. One side is a building that has been vacant for a whole year. But instead of allowing the two sides to meet through flexible policies, the system chose to delay. Postponement, due to concerns that changes in planning will reduce the value of surrounding real estate. Delays, because large real estate investors want to keep supply low to maintain high prices. Delays, because legal meetings drag on for years just to debate the definition of the term compliant. The answer does not lie in a lack of resources. It lies in the lack of prioritization. When a city prioritizes permits, procedures, profits over human lives, the issue is no longer homelessness, but indifference. So, what can we change? The answer is, policies are made by people, and it is people who can change them ourselves. If lawmakers want, they can temporarily suspend some regulations in emergency situations. They could experiment with converting vacant buildings into temporary housing, with lower standards but still safe. They could allow community organizations to use vacant spaces at low cost to set up shelters. The only thing missing is the will. And if this city cannot prioritize the poor over pieces of zoning certificates, then there will come a time when those who were once protected by the law will become its victims. What do you think when you see a building standing empty for years while homeless people still sleep under the rain? Who is the law protecting, and who is it abandoning? New York was once a place of diverse communities, where immigrants and laborers created vibrant neighborhoods. From the small coffee shops in Queens, the grocery stores in the Bronx, to the bakeries in Brooklyn, each place is a piece that contributes to a vibrant and connected city. But today, that is gradually falling apart. Not by a natural disaster or an attack of any kind, but by the silent erosion from within. Poverty, homelessness, job loss, and fear spreading across all classes. People started closing their windows when going to bed. The stores close early because customers no longer come. The neighborhoods that were once bustling with the sounds of children and laughter have now become unusually quiet. Not peaceful, but rather cold. When the gap between those with homes and those without homes becomes too wide, trust between people also begins to fracture. Middle-class residents no longer dare to let their children go to school alone. The elderly women who used to call each other from their balconies no longer see each other. One moved away, and the other no longer dares to go out in the evening. The community support system, once the backbone of residential areas, is also beginning to collapse. Community centres are being budget cut. Churches have to partially close due to insufficient funds. The food distribution points are overwhelmed, forced to turn away newcomers. And amidst all that, the so-called community began to become just an empty word. Do you think this collapse only affects the poor? Look deeper. A man who was once a teacher, living in a quiet neighborhood in Queens, had to leave his apartment after the rent doubled in 2 years. He lives in a car near his old school, and every morning he still comes to tutor, hiding his true circumstances. No one knows where he sleeps. No one asks, because everyone is busy surviving their own lives. This is the real fracture. When the community no longer sees each other, no longer helps each other, and no longer believes that they can overcome together. When trust is eroded, the bond between people, between the citizens and the government, also begins to fray. Every time a promise of reform is delayed, Every time a housing project is cancelled due to procedures, another invisible wall is erected between the government and the people. A community cannot exist if people live next to each other but do not know how to see each other. If a homeless person is seen as a problem to be cleaned up instead of a person in need of help, that rift will spread like a small crack on a windshield, gradually shattering the entire view. We are witnessing this in every neighborhood. Those who once lived stably, who once had roles in the community, are being pushed to the margins. And when they lose their place, the community also loses a part of its soul. It's not just the homeless who are affected, but all of us. If a city cannot maintain the connection between people and people, between this house and that house, between the people and the government, then is it still a true community? Did you ever think that homelessness was something far removed from your life? Then look back at the once bustling shopping malls that are now cold and empty. Once the symbols of consumerism for an entire generation, now they are just silent concrete blocks, devoid of people, light, and life. Yet at nightfall, they become the reluctant shelters for those whom this very city has rejected. The harsh truth is, many shopping malls and offices in New York have remained empty for years, while tens of thousands of people have no place to sleep. They huddle in the dark corners of buildings that were once built to welcome thousands of visitors each day. Now they are ghost houses that no one wants to mention. Transforming these spaces into living areas. A reasonable idea, but not at all easy. Legal barriers, architectural requirements, renovation costs, all of these make transforming abandoned buildings into shelters for the homeless an impossible mission. Meanwhile, the elderly, veterans, and service workers, those who have quietly contributed, are left out on the streets. And don't think that only the unemployed are vulnerable. The middle class, once the backbone of the city, is also facing the risk of collapse. When rent prices soar while wages remain stagnant, just one setback, such as an accident, illness, or job loss, is enough to pull them into a downward spiral with no way out. They are the ones who still work in the morning, but at night they huddle in their cars, in the park, in a dark corner of the hallway, hoping no one notices. The consequences spread like cracks beneath the earth. The shops that once thrived on office workers now have to close down. The community is gradually disintegrating into smaller parts, not with noise or chaos, but with decay, exhaustion, and loss of direction. The problem doesn't only lie in the lack of housing or jobs. The problem lies in the loss of direction of a city that was once a symbol of the American dream. When those who once trusted the system are abandoned, when efforts can no longer exchange for stability, and when trust is replaced by fear, that is when the collapse is no longer a future assumption, but a quietly unfolding reality. And the question is no longer, can New York recover? But rather, when it's your city's turn, will anyone speak up? New York has never just been a city. It used to be a symbol of vibrancy, of opportunity, of lights that never go out. But now, behind the empty buildings, behind the cold shopping malls, behind the steps where people bow their heads to sleep overnight, lies a reality that leaves the whole world speechless. The collapse is no longer a hypothesis. It is happening every day, every hour, in silence. We are still waiting for a miracle, that someone will stand up, revise outdated policies, unlock the tightly shut doors, and give back homes to those who have lost everything. But at this point, perhaps what we need most is the truth. That if we do not take action, do not speak up, do not look directly at the crack right in the heart of the city, then the next collapse will not just be a building, a neighborhood, but our very faith in the American dream. So, in your opinion, what is truly being neglected in New York today? The buildings, the people, or hope itself? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to support the channel and stay updated with our latest videos. Thank you for watching and see you in the next video. This video is based on reports, data, and information publicly released from press sources, non-governmental organizations, and statistical data from state authorities. All opinions, analyses, and arguments in the video aim to educate, critique society, and raise community awareness, not to criticize any specific individual, organization, or government. We respect all differing viewpoints and encourage viewers to comment in a civilized and responsible manner.